My name's Kamil Haque. I'm born and raised Singaporean, even though I don't look it or sound it. I've been acting since I was 5. When I was 22 years old, I moved to Los Angeles, and I was fortunate enough to study at the Lee Strasberg Theatre Institute, finished their 2-year program, and then I was there on a scholarship, so I managed to hustle my way into teaching there for 6 years. And then I came back after an 8-year stay in LA to open up HCAC, Haque Center of Acting and Creativity, which is the home of method acting in Asia and Singapore's first professional acting school. So I teach mainly and mostly the work of Lee Strasberg and his particular method of acting. And above and beyond that, I teach other classes, but mainly his work. The term method acting didn't really appear until the group theater was founded in like the mid-30s or so in the United States. What had happened was Lee Strasberg had put together a group of people called the group theater, and they had revolutionized the way theater was being presented in America in English. And prior to that, acting had always been very, like, mimicry had been very vaudevillian, very larger than life, whereas now you're seeing very naturalistic, realistic acting, and the work was being presented in a very consistent, realistic, naturalistic manner. And journalists were actually blown away by the way it was being presented and how consistent it was being presented. So literally they would go like, my God, this is amazing. How is he able to do it so consistently and efficiently? It's like there's a way, there's a system, there's a style, there's like a method of acting. We'll call it method acting. And that's how the term came about, method acting. Prior to the emergence of more realistic, naturalistic ways of working, it was again very much mimicry, about voice projection, about manners, about body posture. It was very external, so to speak. The internal life was not prioritized. It was more about projecting to the back of the audience in a way that everyone could see it and understand it. It was almost indicated in a way. Well, I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because method acting isn't a technique at all. I would go so far to say as it's not even a technique so much as it is a way of preparation. And there are approximately 13 different, or at least famous, ways of preparing across the world. Lee Strasberg happens to be one of the many ways of preparing an actor. I would put it to you that Strasberg's method of preparing the actor prioritizes relaxation and emotional memory, as well as improvisation, actually. I mean, within the work of Lee Strasberg, I mean, if I were to break it down, the fundamental of all his work is his relaxation for the actor. And once you have relaxation, then you can begin to work on sense memories as an actor. Once you work on sense memories, you can find emotional memories. Once you find emotional memories, you find out what works consistently for you as an affective memory, not effective memory. Then there are other aspects of his work, like I mentioned, the improv, like private moments as an actor. Other ways of preparing, for example, for creating a character, he was very big on the animal exercise as a psychophysical way of preparing the actor. And in terms of a diagnostic for the actor, he was also very big on exercises like the song and dance exercise, which is another way of tuning the actor to be ready to work. Well, I mean, you could arguably say that almost all of them can track their roots back to Stanislavski. And what each of the modern masters post-Stanislavski have done is they've isolated one segment of Stanislavski's system of acting and said, I will conquer this part and I will make this and I'll expand on this and call this my method of preparing. Arguably, and these are very broad brushstrokes, you could say Strasberg was very much about grounding yourself in personal experience. whereas Stella Adler was very much about grounding yourself in the imagination of the actor, whereas Meisner was very much about grounding yourself in the immediate circumstances between the actors. And then Michael Chekhov was very much about the psychological gesture, the psychophysical nature of acting. There are others beyond them, but those are probably the more famous of them all. Each has their strengths and weaknesses, in my opinion. To be honest, I'd say all of it is a myth. It is well-spun PR. It's journalists who know how to tap into what sells more copies of magazines and newspapers. All the different methods essentially lead to telling the same thing, being as truthful as you can under imaginary circumstances, period. How you do it, where you do it, why you do it is entirely up to you and your business and no one else's business. As long as it produces the results, that's all that really matters. It just so happens that as you talk now about the business side of acting, it has become sort of fashionable to be more gritty in your approach. Does that necessarily mean that you are a better actor? No, I don't think so. Case in point, I think last year or 2 years ago when DiCaprio won for The Revenant, I don't think it's his best work. But is he being rewarded for a long career? Yes. Is he being rewarded because he ate like a liver of a whatever it is, a horse or a cow or something? I suppose that's really gritty acting. Is that necessarily the sign of a good actor? I don't think so. It's just the fact that he ate liver. Good for him. I think he's a better actor than that. If you ask me, I think where method acting gets its fame is for the fact that it asks of the actor to be more intensive with their preparation, but it does not require an actor to have to hurt themselves, hurt other people, or be an asshole, which is often mixed in with what method acting is about, and it's not about that. I'd say it's a little bit of both. I mean, it's almost like there's no one size fits all, there's no the method. Anyone that tells you there's the method, you need to run away from them very, very fast. I sincerely believe, and my method is this: I don't hurt myself, I don't hurt other people, and I'm not an asshole. Pretty much everything else is fair game in order for me to get the results that I want, meaning the role that I have to play. In the playing of that part, sure, I might have to do things that are uncomfortable to me, that are beyond my habits, and I might need to suffer a little bit, as they say, suffer for your art. I'm not one that believes in having to hurt yourself for your art, and there's a big difference between the two, and a big difference, and yet it's a fine line, and people often mistake that fine line, and I don't think it's healthy for the actor to have to go to a point where you are no longer in control of your own technique. Because if you think about it, a true master is not one who can turn it on. A true master is one who can turn it off as quickly as you can turn it on. And very often, as you get knee deep into method acting, whatever the hell that means, they deep dive and then they forget, wait a minute, I'm not actually this role. I have a whole life to live, I've got friends, I've got family, I'm a normal human being, I'm not XYZ that I'm playing. And that's where the work gets dangerous, that's where the work gets a bad reputation. So if I were to use a religious analogy as an example, you have the Bible, the Torah, the Quran, and it's essentially a text that tells you this is the system that more or less defines this way of living, this way of working. And one could interpret it and say, yes, let me live my life being pious, righteous, sort of looking after my fellow man, looking after myself. Or I could look at these same texts and go, yes, I am here to kill people, blow myself up, drive a truck through crowds of people, and this is in the name of and in the glory of. And then the large majority go, I'm pretty sure that's not how that's supposed to go. But then, hey, if it works for you, what can I say, right? In the ideal world, there is actually not a lot of difference between the work of Lecoq and Strasberg, for example, because both, basically the roots of both suggest that the actor is full of tics and bad habits that the actor needs to begin to be aware of, eliminate, so that they can start from a blank canvas to begin to build characters. Unfortunately, what has happened with the work of, say, someone like Lee Strasberg is that, and method acting, whatever that means, is that it is compounded by years and years and generations of bad press and bad PR, and examples of actors who've hurt themselves or have suffered to the point of hurting themselves or the people around them. And so method acting perhaps has a lot of unnecessary baggage. That's number one. Number two is what you're also dealing with when you're talking about, say, Lecoq work or physical work versus the psychophysical work of the actor, is you're asking the actor not only to train themselves intensely on a physical aspect, but also to dig deep into their own psyche, into their own imagination. And that's where the work is perhaps not as easy to approach, because you would think, oh, it's in me, it should be easy to come out. But what you're dealing with is 20, 30 years of baggage and your own sort of like isms that you have to dig deep and pull out of. And the work in and of itself gets difficult because you're working against 30 years of bad habits. I guess one of the biggest questions is first demystifying what it is. That you don't need to do drugs to be a drug dealer. You don't need to kill someone to be a psychopath. There are other ways of tapping into that psyche, that physicality. And once you begin to go past the ideas of demystifying it, then the next thing is you're working through the process of giving the actor permission to dig deep, because not everyone wants to, not everyone knows how to dig that deep. Then once you get past that, then you have to work towards, and assuming they know how to turn it on, then the next stage is teaching the actor how to turn it off. Because then, okay, I can cry on cue and I can feel all these things and all of this stuff is going on. Okay, great. Now you're going to learn how to control the flame a little bit so you don't overcook all the time. Then the last part of all of that is, beyond turning it off, is being able to be mindful of self-care of the actor, so that outside of the work they lead a healthy, balanced life. Mr. Strasberg used to say this a lot: if you really want to learn about acting, it's not going to happen in a class. You want to learn about acting, go build a boat. And did he mean actually go build a boat? Sure, maybe. But I believe what he meant was go live a life. Go see things, get your heart broken, get your heart made, talk to people, find out what's going on in life. Have a healthy perspective as to what life is about beyond the bubble of what acting is. Well, you can actually track all of that personal sort of self-exploration thing all the way back from Stanislavski, seeing as we track back to that man. The foundation of his system are the words "know thyself." And you literally cannot begin to play someone else if you don't even know what you bring to the table. Now, the work in and of itself, if taught appropriately, is preconditioned and disclaimed to be therapeutic, but it is not therapy at all. The moment you begin to look towards acting as a form of therapy, then it is probably not healthy. And there are other avenues of drama therapy that one can do, but to begin to look at it as a form of, I need to fix my stuff, it's probably not the most appropriate venue. That being said, because it is therapeutic, there are ways and means of playing characters, exploring yourself, exploring different roles, different scripts, where you get to flush the system out, where you get to experience catharsis. But the whole idea here is to do it in a safe, healthy, appropriate manner, so that, again, you are still sort of being true to the work, or truthful with the work. You're being responsible with yourself, responsible with your fellow actors. And even as you explore who you are also not losing who you are. You might grow your definition of yourself. You might expand your definition of yourself. You might try things that are beyond you normally. And yet at the same time, it is not a platform for you to go, blah, here are my problems, you deal with it. I don't think acting, or acting in the purest sense of the word, again, whatever that means, is meant for you to just go blah. It still needs to be shaped and formed in a way that can be constructive towards a production. suppose the question I want to ask to people is, why act? I mean, if you could do anything in the world, why on earth would you want to act? It is not the easiest of careers. It is not the most financially rewarding of careers. It is perhaps the most personal of all the crafts. It is the only art form where no one actually wants to see your technique. It is perhaps one of those things where you're going to have to work harder physically, mentally, spiritually than you ever have in the world. Why on earth would you want to do it? You've got to be mildly insane a little bit to want to do it. But that being said, if you still say, yes, I want to do it and this is what I'm going to dedicate myself to, then the next question you got to ask yourself is, what stories do you want to tell? Why do you think your story needs to be heard more than any other story? And what is it that you're bringing to the table that separates you from everyone else? How can you personalize the work that you do in such a way that when people see you on screen or on stage, then they might go, yeah, that person is the voice for the voiceless, whatever you are representing. And if you feel, oh, I'm actually just doing it for the fame and for the Instagram likes, then maybe you might need to look at something else.